The year was 1923, and New York City breathed through its pores like a living beast. Steam rose from manholes, mixing with the smoke of 1,000 chimneys, while electric trams carved their paths through streets thick with immigrants, dreamers, and those who preyed upon both. Isaac Blumenfeld had once commanded rooms with his presence. His textile empire stretched across 3 boroughs, employing hundreds who knew his name meant steady wages. But now, 6 months after his son Samuel had vanished, Isaac looked like a shadow of his former self. His expensive overcoat bore stains of countless nights wandering the city's darkest corners. Deep lines etched around his eyes, shoulders curved inward as if carrying invisible weight. Temple Street knew him now. So did Harlem's narrow alleys and the Lower East Side's crowded tenements. Every newsstand operator, street vendor, every child playing in gutters had seen his face, heard his plea. "Have you seen my boy? 17 years old, dark hair, about this tall." He would pull out the same worn photograph, creased from handling, showing Samuel in graduation clothes, smiling that confident smile now mocking Isaac across an unbridgeable chasm of time. Detective Sergeant Patrick Dorian had seen many desperate fathers in 15 years with the NYPD, but something about Isaac struck him differently. Perhaps it was how the wealthy industrialist came to the precinct not demanding special treatment, but pleading for help like any broken parent. Or maybe how Isaac insisted on joining every search, refusing to sit in his mansion while others looked for his boy. "Mr. Blumenfeld," Dorian had said that first day, his Irish accent softened by years of grieving families. "You're paying me to do this job. You don't need to walk every street yourself." But Isaac simply shook his head, eyes holding pain that transcended class and ethnicity. "Sergeant, if your boy was missing, would you sit at home?" Their partnership formed gradually, built on shared nights tramping through neighborhoods where respectable men rarely ventured. They questioned dock workers speaking broken English, searched flophouses where men slept 3 to a bed, walked through dance halls where young people tried forgetting daily harshness. Each lead crumbled like dust. The trail started at Grand Central Terminal, where a porter remembered seeing a young man matching Samuel's description arguing with someone near the information booth. But memory was fuzzy, busy day, thousands of faces. He couldn't be certain except the young man seemed upset, agitated, running from something rather than toward it. Why would he run? Isaac asked himself this question 100 times daily. His son had everything: warm home, best education money could buy, secure future in family business. They had argued, yes, but what father and son didn't? Samuel complained about feeling constrained, wanting to see the world beyond their comfortable Upper East Side existence, but Isaac dismissed it as youthful restlessness. Now those words haunted him with missed opportunities and misunderstood signals. Part 2. Discovery at the Shelter, 3,000 characters. The year was 1923, and New York City breathed through its pores like a living beast. Steam rose from manholes, mixing with the smoke of 1,000 chimneys, while electric trams carved their paths through streets thick with immigrants, dreamers, and those who preyed upon both. In this maze of humanity, one man walked with purpose born of desperation. Isaac Blumenfeld had once been the kind of man who commanded rooms with his presence. His textile empire stretched across 3 boroughs, employing hundreds of workers who knew his name meant steady wages and fair treatment. But now, 6 months after his son Samuel had vanished without a trace, Isaac looked like a shadow of his former self. His expensive overcoat, once pristine, now bore the stains of countless nights spent wandering the city's darkest corners. Deep lines had etched themselves around his eyes, and his once proud shoulders curved inward as if carrying an invisible weight. Temple Street knew him now. So did the narrow alleys of Harlem and the crowded tenements of the Lower East Side. Every newsstand operator, every street vendor, every child playing in the gutters had seen his face, heard his plea. "Have you seen my boy? 17 years old, dark hair, about this tall." He would pull out the same worn photograph, creased from handling, showing Samuel in his graduation clothes, smiling that confident smile that now seemed to mock Isaac from across an unbridgeable chasm of time. Detective Sergeant Patrick Dorian had seen many desperate fathers in his 15 years with the New York Police Department, but something about Isaac Blumenfeld struck him differently. Perhaps it was the way the wealthy industrialist had come to the precinct, not demanding special treatment, but pleading for help like any other broken parent. Or maybe it was how Isaac insisted on joining every search, refusing to sit in his mansion while others looked for his boy. "Mr. Blumenfeld," Dorian had said that first day, his Irish accent softened by years of dealing with grieving families. "You're paying me to do this job. You don't need to walk every street yourself." But Isaac had simply shaken his head, his eyes holding a pain that transcended class and ethnicity. "Sergeant, if your boy was missing, would you sit at home?" Dorian had no answer for that. He had no children of his own, but he understood the language of a father's love. Their partnership had formed gradually, built on shared nights tramping through neighborhoods where respectable men rarely ventured. They had questioned dock workers who spoke in broken English, searched flophouses where men slept 3 to a bed, and walked through dance halls where young people tried to forget the harshness of their daily lives. Each lead had crumbled like dust in their hands. The trail had started at Grand Central Terminal, where a porter remembered seeing a young man matching Samuel's description arguing with someone near the information booth. But the porter's memory was fuzzy. It had been a busy day, thousands of faces had passed through, and he couldn't be certain of anything except that the young man had seemed upset, agitated, as if running from something rather than toward it. Why would he run? Isaac asked himself this question 100 times each day. His son had everything: a warm home, the best education money could buy, a secure future in the family business. They had argued, yes, but what father and son didn't argue? Samuel had complained about feeling constrained, about wanting to see the world beyond their comfortable Upper East Side existence, but Isaac had dismissed it as youthful restlessness. Now those words haunted him with the weight of missed opportunities and misunderstood signals. As winter gave way to spring, their search had taken on a desperate urgency. Isaac began to notice things about the city he had never seen before, despite living there all his life. He saw children sleeping in doorways while well-dressed people stepped over them without a glance. He witnessed the exhaustion in the faces of women emerging from sweatshops after 14-hour shifts. He observed the way hope and despair lived side by side in neighborhoods just miles from his own privileged world. The boy might not want to be found, Dorian had suggested gently one evening as they sat in a diner in Little Italy, sharing coffee and day-old pastries. Sometimes people disappear because they're looking for something they can't find at home. Isaac had stared into his cup, watching the steam rise like prayers he was afraid to voice. "Then I need to understand what I failed to give him," he had whispered. Tonight was different, though neither man could have explained why. Perhaps it was the way the fog rolled in from the harbor, thicker than usual, muffling the sounds of the city until their footsteps echoed strangely off wet brick walls. Or maybe it was simply that they had exhausted every other possibility, and only the most desperate places remained to be searched. They walked through the Lower East Side with renewed purpose, past synagogues where old men prayed in languages Isaac had half forgotten, past Catholic churches where Irish and Italian families sought solace, past the small Baptist congregation where black families gathered to sing hymns that made the windows tremble. The city's various communities lived parallel lives, intersecting only when necessary, each group protecting its own while viewing others with suspicion born of too much hardship and too little understanding. Part 2. Discovery at the Shelter, 3,000 characters. The abandoned shelter squatted between two tenement buildings like a wound refusing to heal. Its windows were boarded up, front door hanging askew on rusted hinges. But something made both men pause, a sense this place held secrets, that behind its damaged facade, life continued in forms they might not recognize. Isaac's heart raced as they approached. After months of searching, hope had become dangerous, too painful to indulge fully. But this moment felt different, charged with possibility and dread equally. Dorian pushed the door open carefully, hand instinctively moving to his service revolver. The smell hit them first: unwashed bodies, rotting food, dampness that spoke of too many nights without proper shelter. But underneath, something else. the scent of someone trying to maintain dignity in impossible circumstances. They moved through the entrance hall, footsteps echoing off broken tiles. Somewhere in the building's depths, they heard voices, young voices, speaking in hushed tones. Isaac's breath caught. One of those voices sounded familiar, carried an intonation he had heard every day for 17 years. Following the sound through a maze of debris-strewn corridors, they reached what had once been the shelter's main dormitory. Weak sunlight filtered through cracks in boarded windows, casting strange shadows across the room. And there, in the far corner, Isaac saw him. Samuel sat against a wall, thinner than his father remembered, clothes dirty and torn but eyes still holding that spark of intelligence Isaac had always admired. Beside him crouched a small black girl, maybe 12 years old, clutching a tiny kitten to her chest. The animal wasn't moving. "Samuel?" Isaac whispered, the name falling from his lips like a prayer finally answered. His son's head snapped up, eyes widening with a mixture of recognition and something else. Fear? Shame? The girl immediately stepped in front of Samuel. Despite being half his size, her chin raised defiantly. "You can't take him," she said, her voice carrying an authority that seemed impossible from someone so young. "He belongs here now, with us." "Son," Isaac stepped forward, hands extended in supplication. "I've been looking everywhere. Your mother is sick with worry. Please, just come home." Samuel stood slowly, the girl Cora. Isaac would learn, staying protectively close. "I can't leave her, Papa. You don't understand what she's been through. What they'll do to her if I'm not here." Dorian studied the scene carefully, noting the makeshift bedding, the careful way they had arranged their few possessions, the obvious care they showed for each other. This wasn't a kidnapping or teenage rebellion. This was something more complex, more desperate. "Who is she, Samuel?" Isaac asked gently, instinctively understanding that any sudden movement might send his son running again. "Her name is Cora," Samuel replied, placing a protective hand on the girl's shoulder. "Her mother worked in the garment district. Died of consumption 3 months ago. She's been living on the streets since then, but some men have been hunting her. Bad men who say her mother owed them money." Part 3. The Dark Truth, 3,000 characters. The silence stretched between them like a taut wire ready to snap. Isaac looked at his son, really looked at him, and saw not the rebellious teenager he had expected to find, but a young man who had discovered something about the world that his privileged upbringing had never prepared him for. Samuel's eyes held a weight that spoke of sleepless nights spent watching over someone more vulnerable than himself. Dorian stepped forward, his detective instincts taking over. "Cora, these men who are looking for you, do you know their names? Where they operate from?" The girl's eyes darted between the 3 men, calculating whether she could trust them. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's Tommy the fish. He runs numbers for the Italian families down by the docks. And there's Big Mike Callahan, who collects from the Irish neighborhoods. But the one who scares me most is called Snake Eyes Pete. He's the one who comes after the children." Isaac felt his blood run cold. He had heard whispers of these men in his business dealings, rumors of a shadow economy that preyed on the desperate. But he had always assumed such stories were exaggerated, the kind of urban legends that grew in the telling. Now, looking at this small girl clutching a dead kitten while speaking of horrors with the matter-of-fact tone of someone who had seen too much, he realized how sheltered his own world had been. "My mama," Cora continued, tears beginning to flow down her cheeks. "She borrowed $50 when the cough got real bad. The doctor said there was medicine that might help, but it cost more than she made in 2 months at the factory. Tommy the fish said it was no problem, that she could pay it back a little at a time. But the interest kept growing, and when she died, they said the debt passed to me." Samuel's jaw tightened. They told her a 12-year-old girl could work it off in the factories, or in other ways. When I found her, she had been running for a week, sleeping in doorways, eating scraps from garbage bins. They had already tried to grab her twice. "How much does she owe?" Isaac asked, his business mind automatically calculating solutions. "Started at $50, Cora replied. But with interest and penalties for missed payments, they say it's over 300 now. And it keeps growing every day. Dorian shook his head grimly. It's a common racket. They target the most vulnerable widows, orphans, immigrants who don't understand the legal system. The debt is designed never to be paid off. They want the person, not the money. Isaac felt a rage building in his chest unlike anything he had ever experienced. In his world, business was conducted with contracts and handshakes, with honor and mutual benefit. This was something else entirely, predation in its purest form, evil disguised as commerce. "They know you're here," Samuel said quietly, watching his father's face change. "They have people watching the shelters, the churches, anywhere kids might hide. We've moved 3 times in the past month, but they always find us eventually." As if summoned by his words, the sound of footsteps echoed from the corridor outside. Multiple sets of feet, moving with purpose. Dorian immediately drew his revolver, motioning for the others to get behind an overturned table that had once served meals to the shelter's residents. Part 4. First shootout in the slums, 3,000 characters. The voice belonged to Gino Carbone, and Isaac recognized it with a chill that went straight to his bones. 3 years ago, they had been business rivals in a textile contract dispute. Gino's father, Salvatore, had tried to muscle in on Isaac's suppliers using intimidation tactics that crossed the line from business into thuggery. Isaac had fought back through legal channels, eventually winning a lawsuit that cost the Carbone family considerable money and respect. He had thought the matter settled. Apparently, he had been wrong. Well, Gino's voice carried a note of cruel amusement as he stepped into the doorway, silhouetted against the dim light from the corridor. Isaac Blumenfeld himself. "Looks like my lucky day just got better. The rich Jew who cost my family a fortune, and now I find him harboring stolen property." "She's not property," Samuel said, standing up despite Dorian's urgent gestures to stay down. "She's a child who needs protection." Gino laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Protection? From what? From honest businessmen collecting honest debts? Your daddy never teach you about honoring contracts, boy?" Behind Gino, 3 other men emerged from the shadows, faces Isaac didn't recognize, but whose type he knew all too well. Street muscle, hired for their willingness to hurt people without asking questions. They carried revolvers openly, making no attempt to hide their intentions. Dorian kept his weapon trained on Gino while addressing the group. "NYPD, you men need to leave these premises immediately. This is a lawful investigation." "Investigation of what?" Gino sneered. "All I see is a runaway girl who owes my associates money, and some rich folks who don't understand how business works in the real world. Your business involves threatening children," Isaac said, finding his voice despite the fear coursing through him. "That's not business. That's extortion." Gino's expression hardened. "You cost my family respect, Blumenfeld. Made us look weak in front of people who matter. Tonight, I get some of that back, plus interest." The first shot came without warning. One of Gino's men, nervous or overeager, fired at the overturned table where they were sheltering. Wood splinters exploded around them as Dorian returned fire immediately, his bullet catching the shooter in the shoulder and spinning him around. "Stay down," Dorian shouted over the suddenly deafening noise of gunfire. The dormitory erupted into chaos as the remaining men opened fire, bullets ricocheting off broken furniture and crumbling walls. Isaac pulled Cora against him, shielding her with his body, while Samuel grabbed a piece of broken chair leg as his only weapon. Dorian moved with professional precision, using the scattered debris as cover while returning fire. His police training showed in every movement, controlled, purposeful, deadly when necessary. Another of Gino's men went down, clutching his leg and screaming. But they were outnumbered, and Gino's remaining associate had circled around to flank them. Isaac saw the man raising his gun toward where Cora huddled against the wall and acted without thinking. He lunged forward, tackling the gunman around the waist and sending them both crashing into a pile of moldy mattresses. The gun went off during their struggle, the bullet going wide. Isaac, who had never been in a physical fight in his life, found himself grappling desperately with a man half his age and twice his strength. Just as the gunman managed to get his weapon pointed at Isaac's chest, Samuel appeared, swinging the chair leg with all his might. The impact sent the gunman sprawling, unconscious. "Time to go!" Dorian shouted. Gino, seeing two of his men down and the third out cold, began backing toward the exit while still firing. "This ain't over, Blumenfeld. Not by a long shot." Part 5. Escape to the factory, 3,000 characters. The police sirens grew louder as they gathered their few possessions and prepared to flee. Dorian knew his fellow officers would ask questions he wasn't ready to answer, questions about why a wealthy businessman and a police detective were involved in a gunfight in an abandoned shelter with 2 children. The official investigation would take time they didn't have. "We can't go to your house," Samuel said to his father as they made their way through the shelter's back exit. "They'll be watching it now." Gino's not the type to give up easy. Isaac nodded, his mind racing. In the space of one evening, his comfortable world had been turned upside down. The son he had been searching for was now a fugitive. The child they were protecting was being hunted by criminals, and he himself had become a target for revenge. But strangely, he felt more alive than he had in months. "The factory," he said finally. "My textile factory in Brooklyn. It's got good security, thick walls, and enough space for us to think through our next move." They made their way through the twisting streets of the Lower East Side, moving carefully to avoid the main thoroughfares where police cars were converging on the scene they had just left. Cora still clutched the dead kitten, refusing to let go despite Samuel's gentle suggestions that they should leave it behind. "It was the only friend I had before Samuel found me," she explained quietly. "Its mama got killed by a cart, and it was all alone, just like me. I've been taking care of it, but it got sick and—" Her voice trailed off, but Isaac understood. The kitten represented everything she had lost: innocence, security, the simple comfort of caring for something weaker than herself. The journey to Brooklyn took over an hour, traveling by foot and then by trolley, constantly watching for signs they were being followed. Dorian's police training proved invaluable as he guided them through routes that would be difficult to track, doubling back occasionally to check for pursuit. Isaac's textile factory sat in an industrial district where the sound of machinery and the smell of dye and cotton fiber masked the presence of anyone who might be hiding inside. He unlocked the heavy front doors and led them into the familiar world of his legitimate business. Rows of sewing machines, bolts of fabric stacked to the ceiling, the ordered chaos of productive enterprise. "We can set up in my office upstairs," Isaac said. "There's a couch, running water, and enough supplies to last us several days while we figure out what to do next." As they climbed the stairs to the administrative level, Samuel finally spoke about what had driven him away from home. "Papa, I didn't leave because I was ungrateful. I left because I felt like I was suffocating. Every day was planned out for me: what school I should attend, what job I should take, who I should marry. I felt like I was living someone else's life." Isaac listened without interrupting, recognizing the pain in his son's voice that matched his own sense of loss and confusion. "When I found Cora that night, when I saw how she was fighting to survive with nothing but her own courage, I realized something. I had been given every advantage in life, but I had never been truly tested. I didn't know if I was strong enough to protect anyone, even myself. Staying with her, keeping her safe, it was the first time I ever felt like I was doing something that mattered." They reached the office, and Isaac turned on the electric lights, revealing a space that suddenly felt more like a fortress than a place of business. "Son," he said, putting his hand on Samuel's shoulder. "I understand now. I failed to see that you needed to find your own way to become a man. But running away wasn't the answer." "No," Samuel agreed. "But it led me to something important. It led me to her." He looked at Cora, who was carefully placing the dead kitten on Isaac's desk and arranging scraps of cloth around it like a tiny funeral shroud. "She doesn't have anyone else, Papa. If we don't protect her, no one will." Part 6. Siege of the Factory, 3,000 characters. They had barely settled into the factory office when the attack began. It was nearly midnight, and Cora had finally fallen asleep on the couch, exhausted by the day's terror. Samuel sat beside her, keeping watch, while Isaac and Dorian planned their next move. None of them saw the shadows moving outside until it was almost too late. The first sign of trouble was the smell of smoke. Dorian noticed it first, his nostrils flaring as he caught the acrid scent of burning gasoline. "Someone's lighting fires," he said, moving quickly to the window that overlooked the factory floor. What he saw made his blood run cold. Flames were already licking at the loading dock where trucks delivered raw materials. Dark figures moved between the machinery, splashing liquid from cans and bottles. As he watched, one of them hurled a Molotov cocktail through a ground floor window, sending glass flying and igniting a stack of cotton bales. "They're trying to burn us out," Dorian announced grimly. "Classic tactic. Smoke us out into the open where they can pick us off." Isaac felt panic rising in his throat. This factory represented his life's work, the livelihood of hundreds of employees. But more than that, it was their only refuge. If they were forced into the open, Gino would have them at his mercy. "The sprinkler system," Samuel said suddenly. "Papa, didn't you install those new automatic sprinklers last year after the Triangle Shirtwaist fire?" Isaac nodded, hope flickering in his chest. The tragedy at the Triangle factory had prompted many business owners to invest in fire suppression systems. "The controls are in the basement, but someone would have to get down there to activate them." "I'll go," Samuel volunteered immediately. "No," Isaac said firmly. "It's too dangerous. If they're setting fires down there." "Papa, I'm the fastest of us, and I know this building better than anyone except you. Besides," he looked at Cora's sleeping form, "someone needs to stay here and protect her." Before Isaac could argue further, the sound of gunfire erupted from below. Gino's men had entered the building and were shooting at anything that moved: steam pipes, electrical fixtures, anything that might drive the occupants out. Bullets ricocheted off metal machinery, creating a deadly symphony of destruction. Cora woke with a start, immediately assessing the situation with the survival instincts of a child who had learned to sleep with one ear open. "They found us," she said simply, no trace of surprise in her voice. Samuel made his decision without further discussion. He grabbed a wrench from Isaac's desk drawer and headed for the door. "Keep them busy up here. I'll get those sprinklers working." As Samuel disappeared down the back stairway, Isaac and Dorian prepared to defend their position. The detective had his service revolver and a box of ammunition he always carried. Isaac, never having owned a gun in his life, armed himself with a heavy metal ruler and tried to remember everything he had ever read about warfare. The attackers were systematic in their approach. They continued setting fires while maintaining a steady barrage of gunfire aimed at the upper windows. Smoke began filling the factory floor, and Isaac could hear the crackle of flames consuming years of hard work and honest labor. "There," Dorian pointed to a figure moving between the sewing machines below. "That's Gino. He's directing the operation personally." Through the smoke and flickering flames, they could see Gino Carbone orchestrating the attack like a general commanding troops. He had brought at least 6 men, all armed, all willing to commit arson and murder to settle what he saw as a debt of honor. Then, miraculously, the sprinklers activated. Water began cascading from the ceiling in powerful streams, immediately beginning to suppress the flames. The attackers, caught off guard by the sudden deluge, scattered for cover. But their celebration was short-lived. As the immediate fire danger receded, Gino's voice echoed through the factory, amplified by the metal walls and machinery. "Blumenfeld, I know you can hear me. Send down the girl and your boy, and maybe I let you live. You got 5 minutes before I decide to finish this the hard way." In the boiler room below, hidden among the massive pipes and gauges that powered the factory, Cora had found Samuel. She had slipped away from the office while the men were focused on the attack, moving through the building's ventilation shafts with the skill of someone who had learned to navigate tight spaces during months of hiding. "I won't let them take me," she whispered to Samuel as water dripped around them. "And I won't let them hurt you because of me." She had taken Dorian's backup revolver from his coat while he wasn't looking. Her small hands could barely grip it properly, but her eyes held a determination that was heartbreaking in someone so young. Part 7. Father's Reconciliation, 3,000 characters. Cora, no, Samuel whispered urgently, trying to take the gun from her small hands. There has to be another way. But before he could stop her, she had slipped away again, moving through the maze of machinery with the ghost-like agility that had kept her alive on the streets. Samuel followed desperately, but she was already climbing toward the main floor where Gino waited with his men. What happened next would be seared into Isaac's memory forever. Through the smoke and steam from the sprinklers, he saw a small figure emerge from behind a bank of textile looms. Cora stood there, barely visible in the dim emergency lighting, the oversized revolver trembling in her grip. "You want me?" she called out, her young voice carrying surprising strength. "Here I am." Gino spun around, a cruel smile spreading across his face. Well, the little mouse comes out to play. Put down that gun, child. You don't even know how to use it." "My mama taught me," Cora replied, steadying her grip. "She said sometimes you have to fight monsters, even when you're scared." Isaac watched in horror as Gino raised his own weapon, clearly intending to kill a 12-year-old girl without hesitation. But Cora was faster than anyone expected. The revolver bucked in her hands as she fired, the bullet catching Gino in the chest and sending him staggering backward. The crime boss looked down at the spreading red stain on his shirt with surprise and disbelief. "A child," he gasped. "Killed by a child." His men, seeing their leader fall, lost their nerve. They fled into the night, abandoning Gino as he collapsed among the textile machinery he had tried to destroy. In the aftermath, as police sirens wailed outside and the sprinkler system finally brought the last flames under control, Isaac knelt beside Cora. She was crying now, the shock and adrenaline wearing off, the weight of what she had done settling on her young shoulders. "I didn't want to hurt anyone," she sobbed. "But he was going to kill Samuel. He was going to kill all of you because of me." Samuel appeared from the smoke, unharmed but shaken. He immediately went to Cora, wrapping his arms around her in a protective embrace. "You saved us," he said simply. "You saved all of us." Isaac looked at his son, really looked at him, and saw not the privileged teenager who had disappeared months ago, but a young man who had found his purpose in protecting someone more vulnerable than himself. The trials of the past months had forged Samuel into someone Isaac barely recognized but deeply respected. "Son," Isaac said, his voice heavy with emotion, "I owe you an apology. I spent so much time trying to build a safe world for you that I forgot to prepare you for the real world. You've become a man while I wasn't looking, and you've done it by choosing to care for someone who needed you." Samuel looked up, tears in his eyes. "Papa, I never meant to hurt you and Mama. I needed to find out who I was when nobody was telling me what to be." "And what did you find?" Isaac asked gently. Samuel looked down at Cora, still trembling in his arms. "I found out that I'm someone who can't walk away when people are suffering. Someone who would rather risk everything than let an innocent child face monsters alone." Isaac felt pride and grief warring in his chest. His son had indeed become a man, but the price had been higher than either of them could have imagined. "Then you're a better man than I ever was at your age," he said. "Maybe a better man than I am now." Dorian, who had been coordinating with the arriving police officers, returned to find the family reconciling amid the wreckage. "The fire's out," he reported. "Damage is extensive but not total. You can rebuild." Isaac nodded, but his attention remained focused on Samuel and Cora. "We will rebuild," he said. "All of us, together." He made a decision that surprised even himself. "Cora, if you'll have us, I'd like you to be part of our family. Not as a charity case or an obligation, but as our daughter. Samuel found his courage protecting you. Now let us protect you." Part 8. New challenge, 3,000 characters. 3 days after the factory fire, the Blumenfeld family thought they had found peace. Isaac had moved quickly to repair the damage, hiring crews around the clock to restore the machinery and workspace that provided jobs for so many immigrant families. Samuel and Cora worked alongside the repair crews, the boy teaching the girl how to operate some of the simpler equipment while she shared stories of the neighborhood's hidden passages and safe houses. But peace, as Isaac was learning, was a luxury that men like him could rarely afford for long. The funeral of Gino Carbone was held at St. Patrick's Cathedral in Little Italy, attended by half the criminal underworld of New York City. Isaac read about it in the morning newspapers, studying the photographs of well-dressed men whose faces he didn't recognize but whose reputations he had begun to learn about. The article mentioned that Gino's older brother, Salvatore Carbone, had arrived from Chicago to attend the services. What the newspaper didn't mention, but what Isaac learned from Detective Dorian's police contacts, was far more troubling. Salvatore Carbone was not just Gino's brother. He was a made man in the Chicago outfit, with connections to the most powerful crime families in the country. Unlike his younger brother, who had been merely a local thug with delusions of grandeur, Salvatore was the real thing. Intelligent, ruthless, and possessed of resources that dwarfed anything Gino had commanded. "He's been asking questions?" Dorian reported during one of his daily visits to check on the family's security. "Wants to know exactly what happened that night, who was involved, and why his brother died in a textile factory instead of collecting a simple debt." Isaac felt the familiar chill of dread settling in his stomach. "What kind of questions?" "The kind that end with people disappearing," Dorian replied grimly. "Word on the street is that he's particularly interested in the girl who pulled the trigger. Apparently, the idea of a child killing a Carbone has become something of a legend in certain circles. Some see it as proof that the family is weak. Others see it as an insult that demands blood payment." Samuel, who had been listening from the doorway, stepped into the room. "So we're back where we started. Running and hiding." "Not running," Isaac corrected, surprised by the steel in his own voice. "Standing our ground. This factory, this community, it's worth fighting for." But even as he spoke the brave words, Isaac knew they were facing something beyond their previous experience. Gino had been angry and impulsive, leading a small gang of local toughs motivated by personal grudges and immediate greed. Salvatore would be different, patient, methodical, backed by an organization that treated violence as just another business expense. The first sign of Salvatore's presence in the city came not through direct confrontation, but through a campaign of psychological warfare. Isaac's suppliers began canceling contracts, citing concerns about business stability. Bank officials who had always been eager to extend credit suddenly found reasons to call in loans early. The message was clear. Anyone who did business with Isaac Blumenfeld was putting themselves at risk. More troubling were the reports that reached them through Dorian's network of informants. Children in the neighborhood had been approached by well-dressed strangers offering money for information about the colored girl who lives with the rich Jew. So far, the community had closed ranks. Years of dealing with outside threats had taught them the value of protecting their own. But Isaac knew that loyalty could be bought, especially when people were hungry enough. "He's playing a longer game than Gino did," Samuel observed one evening as they reviewed their security arrangements. "Instead of charging in with guns blazing, he's trying to isolate us, make us vulnerable." Cora, who had been unusually quiet since learning about Salvatore's arrival, finally spoke up. "It's because of what I did, isn't it? I killed his brother, and now he has to kill me to keep his reputation." Isaac knelt down beside her chair, taking her small hands in his. "Cora, you defended yourself and protected your family. That's not something to be ashamed of." "But people are going to get hurt because of me," she replied, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "Maybe I should just turn myself in. Tell him it was my fault, that you didn't have anything to do with it." "Absolutely not," Samuel said firmly. "We're not giving up on each other. Not now, not ever." The conversation was interrupted by a soft knock at the factory's front door. It was past business hours, and they weren't expecting anyone. Dorian immediately drew his weapon, motioning for the others to move away from the windows. But the visitor wasn't Salvatore or any of his men. It was Mrs. Romano, an elderly Italian woman who lived in the tenement next to where Cora's mother had died. She clutched a small envelope in her weathered hands, her face creased with worry. "A man came to my building today," she said in heavily accented English. "Well-dressed, polite, but with eyes like a snake. He gave me this to deliver to you, said it was very important that you read it tonight." Isaac took the envelope with trembling fingers. His name was written on the outside in elegant script, and the envelope was sealed with red wax bearing the impression of a family crest. Part 9. Final Battle in the City, 3,000 characters. Isaac stared at the letter for a long moment, weighing their options. Meeting Salvatore Carbone on his terms felt like walking into a trap, but ignoring the invitation would only delay the inevitable confrontation while allowing their enemy to choose the time and place of the final battle. "He's not going to negotiate," Dorian said after reading the message. "Men like Salvatore don't send polite invitations when they want to make deals. This is about making a statement, showing the city that nobody kills a Carbone without consequences." "Then why ask us to come to City Hall?" Samuel wondered. "That's about as public as you can get." Isaac understood the strategy immediately. "Because he wants witnesses. If he kills us in some back alley, it's just another gang murder that the police might investigate. But if he does it in front of the mayor's office in broad daylight, it sends a message to every criminal organization in the city. This is what happens when you cross the Carbone family." They spent the night planning their response. Dorian wanted to bring back up other police officers who could arrest Salvatore before any violence occurred. But Isaac knew that wouldn't work. A man like Salvatore wouldn't come to such a meeting without ensuring he had legal protection, probably through bribes or political connections that reach deep into the city's power structure. "We go," Isaac decided finally, "but we go prepared, and we don't go alone." The next morning, they arrived at City Hall an hour early. Isaac had called in favors from every legitimate businessman he knew, asking them to be present at the mayor's office for various meetings scheduled around noon. He also arranged for 3 different newspaper reporters to be covering routine municipal business at exactly the right time. If Salvatore wanted a public confrontation, Isaac would give him one, but with witnesses who would ensure the truth was told. Samuel insisted on coming despite Isaac's protests, and Cora refused to be left behind. "This started because of me," she said with the stubborn determination that had kept her alive on the streets. "I'm not hiding while other people fight my battles." They entered the marble halls of City Hall precisely at noon, their footsteps echoing off the high ceilings. The mayor's reception room was exactly as Isaac had expected, filled with well-dressed people conducting the mundane business of city government, creating the perfect stage for whatever Salvatore had planned. Salvatore Carbone was easy to spot among the crowd of clerks and petitioners. He was a tall man with silver hair and expensive clothes, carrying himself with the confidence of someone accustomed to having his wishes obeyed without question. Unlike his brother Gino, there was nothing crude or obvious about Salvatore's menace. He looked like a successful businessman, which in many ways he was. 2 men flanked him, bodyguards who had clearly been chosen for their ability to blend into respectable society while remaining ready for violence at a moment's notice. They positioned themselves near the exits, cutting off escape routes while maintaining the pretense of casual conversation with other visitors. "Mr. Blumenfeld," Salvatore said with a slight smile as Isaac approached. "How good of you to accept my invitation. And you brought the children. How thoughtful." "Mr. Carbone," Isaac replied evenly, "I believe you wanted to discuss a business matter." "Indeed, the matter of a debt owed to my family." Salvatore's eyes moved to Cora, who stood slightly behind Isaac but met his gaze without flinching. "Such a small child to cause so much trouble. Do you know what your actions have cost me, little girl?" "I know what your brother was going to cost her," Samuel interjected, stepping protectively in front of Cora. "He was going to sell a 12-year-old child to pay a debt that existed only in his imagination." Salvatore's smile never wavered, but his eyes grew cold. "My brother was conducting legitimate business. The girl's mother entered into a contract, and the debt passed to her heir upon her death. Simple business law." "Extortion isn't business," Isaac said firmly, "and children aren't collateral." The conversation continued for several more minutes, each man stating his position while the crowd around them grew larger and more attentive. Isaac could see the newspaper reporters moving closer, their notebooks ready. Everything was proceeding according to plan until Salvatore made his final offer. "I am prepared to be merciful," he announced in a voice loud enough to carry throughout the room. "I will accept the child as payment for the debt, and I will consider the matter closed. Refuse, and I will be forced to collect what is owed through other means." It was then that Cora stepped forward, Dorian's backup revolver appearing in her small hands as if by magic. The crowd gasped and began backing away, but she kept the weapon pointed steadily at Salvatore's chest. "I already paid your family's debt," she said clearly, her young voice carrying to every corner of the room. "I paid it with your brother's life when he tried to murder my family. Now you can decide if you want to pay the same price." The room fell completely silent. Salvatore's bodyguards reached for their weapons, but stopped when they saw Dorian's police revolver trained on them. For a moment that seemed to stretch forever, the fate of everyone present balanced on the edge of a child's determination and a crime boss's pride. Part 10. After the storm, 3,000 characters. "Magnificent," Salvatore said, his laughter echoing off the marble walls. "Absolutely magnificent. A child with more courage than most grown men I know." He looked around the room at the terrified faces, the reporters scribbling frantically, the mayor's staff frozen in shock. "Do you see this, all of you? This is what real power looks like. Not money, not connections, not even violence. Real power is being willing to die for what you believe in." Cora kept the gun steady, though Isaac could see her hands beginning to tremble from the weight of it. "I believe children shouldn't be hurt by grown-ups," she said simply. "I believe families should protect each other. And I believe bullies should be stopped, no matter how important they think they are." Salvatore nodded slowly, as if considering her words with genuine respect. "You killed my brother, child. By the laws of my world, that debt must be paid in blood. But—" He paused, studying her face with the intensity of a man who had built his life on reading people accurately. "I find myself impressed by your courage. More than impressed, inspired." The tension in the room was suffocating. Everyone present understood they were witnessing a moment that would either end in tragedy or transform into something unprecedented. Salvatore's bodyguards waited for his signal, their hands hovering near their weapons. Dorian maintained his own defensive position, ready to protect the family he had come to care about as more than just another case. "I am going to make you an offer," Salvatore announced, his voice carrying the authority of absolute decision. "One time only, never to be repeated or negotiated." He looked directly at Cora. "Keep your gun, child. You've earned the right to carry it. But use it wisely, because the next time we meet, I won't be so generous." He turned to Isaac. "Your debt to my family is paid. Not because you've compensated us for our loss, but because this child has shown more honor in defending her family than my brother showed in trying to destroy it." His voice hardened. "But understand this, my protection comes with conditions. You will never speak of our business arrangements to anyone. You will not interfere with my legitimate enterprises. And if anyone asks how this matter was resolved, you will say simply that it was settled between honorable men." Isaac nodded slowly, understanding that they were being offered not just their lives, but their freedom from the shadow world that had nearly consumed them. "And in return?" "In return, anyone who threatens this child or your family will answer to me personally." Salvatore's smile returned, but now it carried genuine warmth rather than menace. "I find myself curious to see what she becomes when she grows up. A child who can face down armed men at 12 years old. The world should be very interesting when she reaches 20. With that, Salvatore Carbone walked calmly out of City Hall, his bodyguards following. The reporters immediately surrounded Isaac and the children, shouting questions that would never be fully answered. The official story, as reported in the next day's newspapers, would describe a misunderstanding between business associates that was amicably resolved through mediation by civic leaders. 6 months later, Isaac's textile factory had not only recovered from the fire damage but had expanded into 2 additional buildings. Samuel worked there every day, learning the business while also studying engineering at night school. He had found his purpose in creating something useful, something that provided honest work for honest people. Cora attended the same private school that Samuel had graduated from, excelling in her studies while never losing the street wisdom that had kept her alive. She still carried the revolver, now legally registered to Isaac and kept in a small holster that the family's tailor had specially designed for her small frame. She never spoke of that day at City Hall, but sometimes Isaac would catch her staring out the window with eyes that seemed far older than her years. The final surprise came on a cold December morning, delivered by a well-dressed messenger who looked suspiciously like one of Salvatore's former bodyguards. The envelope bore the same family crest as the letter that had summoned them to City Hall, but this message was very different. Mr. Blumenfeld, it read, "I hope this finds you and your family well. I wanted you to know that I have recently entered into a partnership with several legitimate business concerns in Chicago. Perhaps someday our paths will cross again under more pleasant circumstances. Please give my regards to the remarkable young lady. Tell her that Salvatore Carbone never forgets courage when he sees it. SC." Isaac folded the letter carefully and placed it in his desk drawer, next to the photograph of Samuel's graduation and the small wooden cross that had belonged to Cora's mother. The past year had taught him many things about himself, his son, and the world they lived in. Most importantly, it had taught him that family was not just about blood. It was about the people you chose to protect, and who chose to protect you in return. But as he looked out at the busy street below, Isaac noticed a figure in a dark coat watching the factory from across the road. The man was too far away to identify, but something about his posture suggested patient observation rather than casual interest. The Carbone family had many branches, and not all debts were forgiven as easily as Salvatore had chosen to forgive theirs. The game, it seemed, was far from over.